because I loved him.
And deadly.
She said that everyone knew that the girl was a tramp and a slut, and that she deserved to die.
She said, David Graham, killer.
It started like any teenage romance. Secret texts under the covers, stolen glances in school hallways, and the intoxicating feeling that they'd found their forever. But behind the smiles and whispered promises, something darker was taking root. Obsession, control, betrayal. These weren't just love stories. They were countdowns to tragedy. In these cases, the very people who claimed to love each other became each other's worst nightmare. What happens when a teenage heart isn't just broken, but dangerous? By the time the truth came out, the only thing left were headlines and questions no one could answer. This is where love turns lethal. Stay with me, because you're about to hear the shocking real-life stories where romance didn't just fade, it killed. Case 1. David Graham and Diane Zamora. On December 4th, 1995, a tragedy unfolded near Joe Pool Lake in Mansfield, Texas. Authorities discovered the body of 16-year-old Adrienne Jessica Jones, an honor student and cross-country athlete, tangled in a barbed wire fence, with blunt force trauma to her head and 2 gunshot wounds to the face. Initially treated as a Jane Doe, she was soon identified by police, and the scene hinted at something deeply personal and chilling. Behind that calm Midwestern facade lay an explosive emotional turmoil. Adrienne, known as AJ, was caught in the middle of 2 driven young cadets. Diane Zamora, a Naval Academy midshipman, and her fiancé, David Graham, a cadet at the U.S. Air Force Academy. Their relationship, rooted in teenage fervor and high expectations, became obsessive and destructive when Graham confessed a sexual encounter with Adrienne, something Diane perceived as betrayal. In her fury, Diane implored, "Kill her." The emotion escalated from mere heartbreak into a calculated, lethal plan. Psychologically, their dynamic hints at codependency and distorted loyalty. 2 individuals destined for elite military careers, both academically driven and disciplined on the surface, allowed intense jealousy to distort their moral compass. Their allegiance twisted into mutual vindictiveness. A tragedy precipitated not by some random intruder, but by people who believed their bond justified murder. The case lay dormant for months until late August 1996, when Diane shared details of the crime with her Naval Academy roommates, 2 cadets who passed the alarming confession up their chain of command. That single thread, emanating from thousands of miles away, unraveled the mystery. Detectives quietly converged on Annapolis, dug deeper, and soon had confessions and evidence, including the 9mm murder weapon, tying both to the crime. As the case shifted to the courtroom, the focus turned to narrative control and culpability. Diane's trial, presided over by Judge Joe Drago, became a psychological chess match. Was she the jealous instigator or a submissive accomplice manipulated by David? Prosecutors argued she was judge, jury, and executioner, luring Adrienne under false pretenses before handing her over to Graham to kill. After intense deliberation, the jury found Diane guilty of capital murder in February 1998. She received life imprisonment with a 40-year minimum. Graham followed in his separate trial later that month, also convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life without parole. In the years since, both Diane and David remain incarcerated and have given interviews expressing remorse, or at times, deflected responsibility. Diane maintains a version of innocence, claiming she tried to save a faltering relationship. David has acknowledged his guilt and the accuracy of his confession, though he once recanted before reaffirming it. In the end, the Adrienne Jones tragedy is not just a story of murder. It's a cautionary tale about obsessive loyalty, psychological pressure, and the devastating consequences when love turns deadly. Case 2. Bernadette Prati. Late on the evening of June 23, 1984, in the affluent enclave of Orinda, California, 15-year-old Kirsten Costas, star athlete, cheerleader, yearbook committee woman, awaited a dinner for the Bobolinks, a sorority-style volunteer group she'd just joined. But the invitation was a lie. It was a trap laid by a classmate, 16-year-old Bernadette Prati, who offered Kirsten a ride in her family's Pinto, to a dinner that didn't exist. Prati, who had faced rejection from both the cheerleading squad and yearbook staff, nurtured resentment and a sense of inferiority. In a later confession, she admitted, "The things that got me mad was it hurt, and I couldn't change. Like looks or money or popularity or things." That rage, fueled by fear that Kirsten would expose her as weird, erupted in violence. As they argued in Prati's car, Kirsten fled and flagged down a nearby resident, Alex Arnold, who gave her a ride home. A mustard-yellow Pinto followed them. Arnold, observing from his car, initially believed he witnessed a fistfight. In fact, Prati had stabbed Kirsten 5 times with a kitchen or butcher knife while fleeing the scene. Severely wounded, Kirsten stumbled across the street before collapsing and dying shortly afterward. The ensuing investigation stretched nearly 6 months. Prati passed a lie detector test, but her alibi didn't hold up under scrutiny. The FBI assisted with a psychological profile that placed her under suspicion. Under mounting pressure, Prati confessed in a letter to her parents. In March 1985, she faced a trial before Judge Edward Merrill. Prosecutors pursued first-degree murder, but the judge ruled that premeditation had not been proven beyond reasonable doubt, reducing the conviction to second-degree murder. Prati received a maximum sentence of 9 years at juvenile facility, though she was released on parole after 7 years in 1992. The legal proceedings played out with emotional testimony. The knife, a visceral symbol of irreversible loss, was displayed in court, provoking a strong reaction from the victim's grieving mother. Despite the sentence, Kirsten's parents voiced they would never feel justice had been met, lamenting their loss and the brevity of Prati's incarceration. Case 3. Regina and Margaret DeFrancisco. Chicago, June 6, 2000. Regina DeFrancisco, aged 17, invites her new boyfriend, 22-year-old truck driver Oscar Velasquez, to her Pilsen neighborhood home, just 3 weeks into their relationship. Unbeknownst to him, this invitation is part of a chilling psychological web spun by Regina and her 16-year-old sister, Margaret. Regina had once been arrested in a drug bust, only to meet Oscar by chance upon exiting court, and he, captivated, gave her a ride home. Over the following weeks, Oscar loaned the sisters $1,000, believing it was bail money for Regina. Instead, it was used to free another man. When Oscar pressed for repayment, Regina deflected. Then came the proposition, a 3-way with Margaret, convincing Oscar to return. But that evening, a darker plan unfolded. During the investigation, the sisters methodically lured Oscar to the basement. Inside, Margaret, armed with a semi-automatic pistol, shot him in the back of the head. Instant, cold, calculated. The motive? Robbery. They took more than $600, his chain, then wrapped his body in car, used nail polish remover as an accelerant, and incinerated both victim and vehicle in an attempt to erase all traces. Through forensic detail, there were phone records placed Oscar at the DeFrancisco residence. Crime scene investigators found matching bedsheet patterns and traces of blood cleaned from the basement. Luminol revealed what looked like cover-up attempts. A witness saw the sisters loading something, a body, into the Camaro, and a friend later cooperated with law enforcement, exposing the plan. At the legal proceedings and trial testimony, Regina and Margaret attempted a self-defense narrative. They claimed Oscar had brandished a weapon, prompting Margaret's fatal shot. But Veronica Garcia, their friend, testified that she believed her gun was meant for robbery, not defense. Other witnesses recounted chilling confessions from the sisters. One said she heard Regina sobbing, "We killed a guy," and Margaret had kicked him so he could die faster. At the sentencing hearing in July 2004, Regina was convicted of first-degree murder and armed robbery. She received a 35-year sentence with parole eligibility not until 2037. Margaret's first trial ended in a hung jury, but at her retrial she was convicted and sentenced to 46 years, parole not until 2050. Case 4. Pamela Smart. In Derry, New Hampshire, in the spring of 1990, Pamela Ann Smart, then only 22 and working as a high school media coordinator, found herself at the center of a sensational case that would grip the nation. On May 1st, her husband Gregory Smart was found shot dead in their condominium. Initially staged to look like a burglary, the investigation would soon unravel a chilling conspiracy. Pamela's emotional involvement with a 15-year-old student, William Billy Flynn, would become the psychological thread that tethered the entire case to moral reckoning. Flynn and 3 teenage friends carried out the murder. Flynn admitted he shot Greg and testified that Pamela had manipulated him, allegedly threatening to withhold intimacy unless he helped remove her husband. As law enforcement probed deeper, investigators discovered that Pamela's intonation during police interviews, even attempting to explain the death as a crime by some jerk looking for a quick $10, raised suspicions. A key breakthrough came when Pamela's intern and friend, Cecilia Pierce, agreed to wear a hidden microphone, capturing incriminating conversations that would fortify the prosecution's case. The 1991 trial, among the first to allow televised proceedings, transformed into a media spectacle. Prosecutors painted a chilling psychological profile. A young, ambitious woman exploiting her position and emotional sway over a vulnerable adolescent, engineering murder to escape a marriage and gain financially. Pamela pleaded innocence, suggesting the teens acted independently. But the taped conversations, passionate testimony, and prosecutorial portrayal of her as a manipulative puppet master tilted the scales. Convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, being an accomplice to first-degree murder, and witness tampering, Pamela received a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. In the years that followed, the teen co-conspirators were granted reduced sentences. Flynn and Patrick Randall paroled in 2015, Latheim earlier, and Fowler in 2003, while Pamela remained confined at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in New York. Behind bars, she pursued education, earned advanced degrees, became an ordained minister, and engaged in mentoring and writing, actions reflecting psychological evolution and a deeper exploration of remorse and rehabilitation. After decades of denying involvement, Pamela publicly acknowledged responsibility, stating in a video that even if she didn't pull the trigger, her bad behavior helped load the gun. Her appeals for clemency and sentence reduction, including reaching out to the governor and executive council, were denied, as state authorities deemed the gravity of the offense and years of narrative shifting insufficient to merit leniency. Case 5. Elizabeth Haysom and Jen Soring. Imagine 2 bright, driven students at the University of Virginia. Elizabeth Haysom, the daughter of a prosperous steel executive and artist, and Jen Soring, the idealistic son of a German diplomat. Their romance ignited in 1984, fueled not just by affection, but by obsessive letters laced with violence and yearning. In one chilling letter, Jen's fantasized about a dinner scene with her parents, terms so vivid they hinted at premeditation rather than youthful drama. The psychological profile of their connection became entwined in shared delusion, what one psychiatrist later described as folie à deux, a dangerous shared psychosis pulling both deeper into its grip. On March 30, 1985, in the quiet neighborhood of Boonesboro, Virginia, Derek and Nancy were found stabbed to death in their home. The violence was shocking, not for its gore, but for the emotional wreckage that followed. Detectives noted no forced entry. Instead, the killers appeared known to the victims. Isabel's alibi, the couple had driven to Washington, D.C. for the weekend, fell apart when the rental car's odometer showed nearly 3 times the distance claimed. Investigators uncovered blood of type O at the scene, matching Jen's, and saw suspicious behavior by both suspects when asked for samples. Jen's fled the country and tampered with evidence. Elizabeth cooperated, raising more questions. Jen's was arrested in London in 1986, but thanks to a landmark case, Searing vs. United Kingdom, the European Court of Human Rights halted his extradition unless Virginia guaranteed they wouldn't seek the death penalty. That ruling highlighted the psychological cruelty of the death row phenomenon. a moment where human rights and legal procedure collided. In 1990, Jens stood trial. Although he had confessed during interrogation, he pleaded not guilty, arguing he had taken the blame to save Elizabeth, believing his diplomatic background could spare him from harsh punishment. Prosecutors dismantled that argument, asserting overwhelming evidence, including crime scene knowledge and physical injuries, tied Jens to the murders. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, pleading guilty to accessory before the fact, portrayed her violent statements as adolescent fantasies. The legal proceedings turned psychological, legal, and theatrical, televised nationwide, with jury and courtroom drama unfolding for millions. Sentencing reflected the gravity. Jens received 2 consecutive life sentences. Elizabeth received a total of 90 years, 45 for each murder. Over decades, Jens filed appeals. In 2019, after 14 parole petitions and continued legal advocacy, he was granted parole and deported to Germany. Elizabeth was paroled and deported to Canada in early 2020. Psychologically, this case illustrates how intense relationships and shared delusions can distort reality, eroding moral boundaries. It highlights the chilling consequences of adolescent fantasy crossing into tragedy and how legal systems wrestle with human rights, mental health, and justice under public scrutiny. Case 6. Justine van der Schoot. On a quiet California afternoon in 2003, 17-year-old Justine van der Schoot, a vivacious young woman with a flair for fashion and a warm energy that lit up any room, vanished without warning. By the early morning of September 2nd, her mother woke in shock to find Justine gone, her truck missing, yet her purse, dog, and belongings still at home. It was a disappearance drenched in confusion and fear. From the beginning, investigators honed in on 2 names: Justine's boyfriend, Daniel Bezemer, then 18, and his roommate, Brandon Fernandez. What appeared to be a typical teenage romance hid deeper currents: jealousy, control, and a toxic dynamic that would soon spiral tragically. Friends would later recall Danny's monitoring of texts and jealousy that grew unwieldy. The breakthrough came when a local horse trainer revisited a trail near Auburn, California, where days earlier he'd noticed a freshly dug hole. On returning, he saw search teams investigating. It dawned on him that the hole he'd seen so innocuously might mark something far darker. When authorities recovered Justine's remains buried in that spot, it became chillingly clear. The grave had been prepared in advance, cold calculation and premeditation at play. The psychological profile of the suspects shaped the investigation's course. Brandon, younger, sharp, even cunning, seemed to enthrall Danny. Together, they navigated youthful rebellion with a disturbing fascination for violence. Brandon had even listed levels of violence on a website. Under growing pressure, Brandon ultimately confessed during an FBI-led interview. He narrated how Danny strangled Justine while she was still alive, and coerced Brandon to help bury her. Remarkably, he described hearing her gasp for air. Her lungs and throat later revealed to contain dirt, proof she was alive when buried. In the legal proceedings that followed, both men pleaded guilty. In 2005, Danny accepted a 25 to life sentence for first-degree murder. Brandon, 15 to life for second-degree. Their pleas circumvented a full trial, sparing the family further pain, but still delivering justice through legal proceedings. Over the years, parole hearings became continuous flashpoints in the family's grief. In July 2022, Brandon's parole was denied for 5 years. Daniel's hearing was scheduled for August 10th. That fight didn't end there. The van der Schoots transformed their anguish into advocacy, working with prosecutors to support Justine's Law, Assembly Bill 1071, passed in 2023. It mandates teenage dating violence education in California schools, a vital lesson drawn directly from Justine's story, aimed at preventing future tragedies. Case 7. Logan MacPhail. It was a cold January afternoon in Hexham. 15-year-old Holly Newton walked through the shops with friends, her nerves on edge. She had sent a message earlier. Her ex-boyfriend, Logan MacPhail, was following her. "He's basically stalking me," she confided. That simple line, delivered over a messaging app, would soon turn catastrophic. Logan was not just unable to accept the end of their 18-month relationship, he was consumed by it. Diagnosed with autism and learning difficulties, he became obsessed. He tracked Holly from a distance, ducking behind buildings and keeping out of view as the two moved through the town center. For 45 minutes he stalked her. Then, under the pretense of reconciliation, he lured her into a narrow alley beside a pizza shop. Without warning, he unleashed a devastating, calculated attack. 36 wounds delivered in under a minute, 12 stab wounds, 19 slashes, plus defensive wounds on Holly's hands. A teenage boy who tried to help was also stabbed. There was restraint and stalking involved, followed by sudden, brutal violence. Investigators noted his emotional detachment. When arrested, he reportedly asked, "Is she dead?" Later, he said he was meant to kill myself, but it went too far. In the criminal justice process, the first hurdle was whether Logan was fit to stand trial. Despite his neurodivergence and learning challenges, expert psychiatric assessments confirmed he possessed the necessary intent and understanding. He was convicted of murder and wounding with intent after a 6-week trial at Newcastle Crown Court. At the sentencing hearing, Mr. Justice Hilliard, describing the act as vicious and brutal, imposed a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Holly's mother, Macaulay Trussler, delivered a courageous tribute to her daughter's kind, energetic spirit, even as she argued that Holly's experience was a clear case of coercive control and domestic abuse. Yet, under current UK law, victims must be 16 or over to qualify. In the courtroom, the mother's plea for reform struck deeply. She highlighted how Holly was too young to be recognized legally as a domestic abuse victim, even though her case embodied coercive behavior, constant monitoring, password changes, emotional blackmail. Her advocacy has prompted policymakers to reconsider the legal age threshold. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has signaled support for reform. Case 8. Love Triangle, Blackmail and Murder, 2025, India. A honeymoon in Meghalaya turns into a nightmare when a young couple from Indore, Raja and Sonam Raghuvanshi, vanished during what should have been the happiest chapter of their lives. On May 23rd, the newlyweds were trekking through Sora's scenic landscape when they disappeared. Raja's body was recovered on June 2nd beneath Waisadong Falls, leading police to rule it a homicide and launch a special investigation team to probe the chilling turn of events. As investigators delved into the couple's last movements, fragmented truths emerged. Sonam, the bride, became the prime suspect, accused of orchestrating her husband's murder during the honeymoon. CCTV footage, mobile records, and eyewitness accounts placed her alongside 3 unidentified men near the gorge the day they disappeared. She was later apprehended in Uttar Pradesh, where authorities allege she hired contract killers, motivated by a secret affair with Raj Kushwaha to eliminate Raja. Parallel to this, in Kanpur, the tragic case of Sumit Gautam unveiled another dark web of love, blackmail, and murder. The 18-year-old factory worker became entangled with a neighborhood girl who was also involved with a colleague, Shiva. When Sumit attempted to blackmail her with obscene videos, the relationship fractured. In a cruel twist, the girl lured Sumit to a secluded spot, where Shiva attacked and strangled him while she held him down. They buried his body under mud and bricks. Call and location data ultimately unraveled the crime, helping the police arrest them and her father. These dual narratives reveal the raw psychological underpinnings that drive betrayal and extremes of control. In the Meghalaya case, there's a chilling calculation, a betrayed wife allegedly recruiting hitmen while on her honeymoon. In Kanpur, we see vulnerability, coercive manipulation, and swift escalation from emotional entanglement to blackmail and violent retaliation. Law enforcement relentlessly pursued both cases. The Meghalaya police rapidly formed an SIT, traced digital footprints, and tracked Sonam across state lines. In Kanpur, forensic evidence paired with phone data closed the murder loop swiftly. Both investigations underscore the power of integrated police work, digital forensics, and cross-jurisdictional coordination. In the Meghalaya case, the courtroom stages a high-stakes legal drama. Sonam is charged with conspiracy and murder by contracting third parties. The prosecution will hinge on proving premeditation and conspiracy derived from digital trail and witness testimony. In Kanpur, the girl and Shiva faced joint charges for homicide and conspiracy, with the daughter's father complicit in attempts to cover the crime. These proceedings underscore how love triangle dynamics and emotional coercion can escalate into fatal outcomes, and how legal systems must untangle them with precision. Case 9. Cassius Turvey. October 2022. Perth's eastern suburbs were the setting for a tragedy that would shock Australia to its core. Cassius Turvey, a 15-year-old Noongar Yamachi boy, was walking home from school with friends when a pickup truck pulled up. What followed was a sudden, terrifying chase into bushland, culminating in something incomprehensible. Cassius was struck in the head with a metal pole, suffering catastrophic brain injury, and he died 10 days later. From the outset, the investigation revealed alarming details. Police traced the attackers. 4 individuals, Jack Brierley, Brodie Palmer, Mitchell Forth, and Alicia Gilmore, were charged. Evidence surfaced that just days earlier, some of the accused had chased and injured another teenager, creating a disturbing pattern. The fatal strike was described by the court as part of vigilante retaliation over minor grievances, not anything connected to Cassius himself. Delving in, court testimony painted chilling portraits. Brierley was seen hunting for school kids, fueled by anger and vengeance, his actions unplanned, yet horrifyingly lethal. Mitchell Forth, though not the one who struck the blow, was found by the jury to have participated via shared common purpose, a willingness to follow and escalate a violent mission. When legal proceedings began in early 2025, the legal proceedings unfolded over 12 intense weeks. Witnesses, including Cassius's own friends, testified about the terrifying sequence, and 91 people gave evidence. The defense emphasized that the attack stemmed from personal grievance, not racial hatred, but multiple witnesses also recounted racist slurs directed at the group of Aboriginal youths, an uncomfortable thread in the case. On the 8th of May 2025, Brierley and Palmer were convicted of murder, while Forth was found guilty of manslaughter. Gilmore was acquitted of murder charges. Soon after, during the sentencing hearing, Cassius's mother, Michelle Turvey, delivered an emotionally wrought statement. She described the void that will never be filled, calling the violence racially motivated vigilantism, acknowledging that while racism wasn't prosecuted as motive, it loomed over the attack. She spoke of enduring anxiety, of trauma so pervasive that the color of her son's green school shirt triggers panic. Chief Justice Peter Quinlan delivered the sentences. Life imprisonment for Brierley, eligible for parole only after 22 years, and for Palmer, after 18 years. Forth received 12 years with a 10-year non-parole period. Justice Quinlan condemned their actions as a horrendous and vengeful act of aggression that robbed Cassius of both life and promise. Looking at the courtroom drama, the trial revealed discord. Defense narratives blamed each other. Brierley put the fatal strike on Palmer. Palmer pushed back. This interplay underscored the chaotic psychology of group violence fueled by anger, groupthink, and misplaced notions of masculinity or toughness. Beyond the courtroom, the case sparked a fierce national conversation about systemic racism, public safety, and the criminal justice system's ability to recognize and punish hate-charged violence. While prosecutors avoided labeling the crime racist, commentators argued the slurs and targeting of Aboriginal youths demanded legal recognition of racial motivation. In the months since, Michelle Turvey's advocacy has emphasized community healing and rehabilitation. As Western Australia's 2024 Australian of the Year, she's helped shape police training focused on empathetic interaction with Indigenous communities, embodying a powerful lesson: transformation can rise from tragedy. Case 10. Kaylee Haywood. In the chill of November 2015, a 15-year-old named Kaylee Haywood vanished from her small Leicestershire town. Her story did not unfold in graphic scenes, but through the chilling psychology of online grooming, the unfiltered pace of a police investigation, courtroom drama, and a message that still resonates today. Kaylee's digital journey began innocently enough. She exchanged over 2,600 messages with a man she met on Facebook in just 2 weeks. He told her she was beautiful, special, all the things many teenagers yearn to hear. Behind the keyboard, a methodical psychological profile of grooming started to emerge, how flattery, attention, and familiarity can be weaponized into manipulation. Within that short window, her trust was crafted and broken. When she agreed to meet this stranger at his home on the 13th November 2015, it marked the end of innocence and the beginning of a fatal tragedy. She arrived consenting but vulnerable. Once there, the grooming escalated. He gave her alcohol, touched her sexually, and then introduced her to his neighbor, turning companionship into entrapment, a horrifying transition captured in legal proceedings. As the shocking truth slowly came to light, Leicestershire Police launched an intensive missing person inquiry, mobilizing search teams, combing CCTV, and engaging the public. When a body was discovered days later, hidden beneath lakeside undergrowth near Ibstock, the trajectory moved from search to a brutal murder investigation. Those procedural steps, from first report, evidence gathering, forensic identification via dental records, to charging suspects, highlight the structured urgency and precision of criminal justice response. In court, uncovering the twisted psyche behind the crimes, Stephen Beedman, once a neighbor, admitted to the rape and murder. Luke Harlow, the groomer, admitted grooming and sexual offenses, but denied falsely imprisoning Kaylee. Trial testimony painted a stark image. Neighbors reported screams and loud bangs, and Kaylee fleeing the house half naked before being chased and pinned down in the night. The moment of truth. Will justice be served? The verdicts reflected both accountability and the broader social imperative. Beedman received a life sentence with a minimum term of 35 years, making him ineligible for parole until 2050, while Harlow was sentenced to 12 years for grooming and false imprisonment. These legal outcomes underline that grooming, predation, and violence are prosecutable in the harshest terms. In the aftermath, the broader dialogue turned toward prevention and rehabilitation. Leicestershire Police produced Kaylee's Love Story, a film shown in schools across the region and viewed millions of times. It became a powerful public safety tool, reinforcing that online grooming can be swift, insidious, and devastating. It serves as both memorial and warning, urging open conversations about digital safety, recognizing grooming signs, and fostering legal as well as emotional resilience. Case 11. Rachel Wade and Sarah Ludeman. It begins in Pinellas Park, Florida, in April 2009, when a simmering, toxic rivalry erupts into tragedy. Rachel Wade, 19, armed with a steak knife and consumed by jealousy, confronts Sarah Ludeman at a friend's home late one night. In the chilling early minutes, no introduction needed, one girl is dead and one's life is behind bars. That immediate jolt launches the investigation into how online feuds, love triangles, and adolescent emotion spiraled fatally. Behind the violence lies a psychologically volatile tinderbox. Two young women entangled emotionally with the same man, Joshua Camacho. Rachel's voicemails, laden with threats, "I'm going to kill you," and taunting MySpace posts reveal a raw emotional overload, a crisis in impulse control, and the dangerous amplification social media can foster. A criminology expert explains how technology allows unfiltered aggression to fester, words spoken in screens, not faces, feed emotional fires teen minds struggle to cool. That is the psychological profile. Intense jealousy, amplified by digital disinhibition, unresolved adolescent conflict, and a volatile triangle, all without proper emotional regulation. The pursuit of justice reveals surprising secrets. Sarah dies after 2 knife wounds, one piercing her heart, and witnesses recount chilling details. Rachel calmly discards the weapon and says, "I'm done." Investigators uncover months of fighting, voicemail threats, confrontations at Applebee's, where Sarah showed up to taunt Rachel, and text-based harassment. Legal proceedings begin with Rachel's immunity hearing under Florida's Stand Your Ground law, where she is denied immunity. The trial, in July 2010, becomes a stark study in causality and intent, a 3-day trial testimony marathon covered by television and live stream. The prosecution lays out the pattern: premeditation fueled by jealousy, threatening voicemails, Rachel's approach with a weapon, and her calm demeanor after the stabbing. The defense counters with self-defense, arguing Rachel felt physically threatened by Sarah and her friends. Her attorney emphasizes size disparity, prior altercations, and emotional fear. Heart-stopping car chase-style testimony describes Sarah slamming brakes in the driveway, Rachel stepping forward and stabbing. Witnesses sharply disagree, though. Prosecution witnesses say Wade initiated the attack. The voicemails ring loud. Within 2.5 hours, the jury finds her guilty of second-degree murder, conviction driven by both intent and the digital trail. The sentencing hearing delivers a sentence of 27 years in prison. The judge makes clear this was no accident. She caused a lot of pain, he states. Rachel's fate becomes a platform for highlighting the dangers of social media-fueled aggression. Her defense counsel points to how digital communication allowed cruelty without accountability. What festered online exploded in real life. In appeals and interviews that follow, Rachel laments social media's role in escalating animosity, acknowledging how, with very little consequence, one can say anything online. Still, she loses her appeal. Case 12. Daniel Bezimer and Brandon Fernandez. What if the person you trusted most betrayed you in the most chilling way imaginable? This is of one of California's most haunting cases, the 2003 disappearance and murder of 17-year-old Justine Vanderscoot. That same night, Labor Day 2003, Justine vanished. A vibrant teen with big dreams, a controlling boyfriend, and an insidious plan unfolding. Daniel Bezimer, as increasingly possessive and jealous, demanding to know where Justine was, monitoring her texts, and reacting with dangerous intensity when she spoke of someone else. A Navy sailor she met in Florida. That tension drives the investigation. Justine's truck was found at a park and ride. Neighbors and law enforcement launched a desperate search that would lead to a gruesome discovery more than 2 weeks later. Her remains buried in a shallow grave in the woods. The forensic findings were devastatingly clear. Dirt in her lungs and esophagus proved she was buried alive. A meticulous psychological unraveling shows a partnership between Danny and his roommate, Brandon Fernandez. The investigation, aided by the FBI, cracked the case. Brandon's recorded phone call and his eventual confession, pointing directly to the grave, revealed layers of manipulation, fear, and chilling cruelty. He described Danny's laughter, the taunting words, I win, playing against a song called The Game, almost like narrating the final minutes of Justine's life. The legal proceedings and trial testimony that follow deepen the drama. In 2005, Bezimer pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and received 25 to life. Fernandez pleaded to second-degree murder and received 15 to life. During sentencing, the community's outrage and grief hovered in the courtroom. They would not allow the narrative to end there. The sentencing hearing echoes through the years as both men repeatedly apply for parole. Each time, prosecutors and the family, backed by the Justice for Justine campaign, turn the hearing into a deep discussion of ongoing danger, trauma, and the impossibility of closure. In 2023, a judge denied Fernandez's resentencing petition under California's SB 1437, reaffirming that he was in on the murder plot, pointing to his uncanny ability to lead investigators to Justine's grave. Case 13, Jonah Poole and Kylie Dakes. It begins on the evening of May 24, 2025, when emergency crews in Davidsonville, Maryland, responded to a blazing vehicle in a parking lot and uncovered a horrifying scene. The body of 67-year-old Edward Stephen Koza, owner of Tropic Bay Water Gardens, inside the burnt vehicle, his hands and mouth bound, his face obscured by soot and tape, and signs of blunt force trauma to the head. Within those first seconds, the audience is plunged into the heart of a dark and chilling investigation, immediately drawn into the unsettling mysteries that lie ahead. As investigators dove into the investigation, they discovered clues that seemed both mundane and sinister. A melted spout from a plastic fuel container, the smell of gasoline lingering in the air, and a Bass Pro Shops baseball cap left near the scene. Investigators traced that hat and a flannel shirt, purchased just hours earlier by a teenage couple, to surveillance footage from a nearby Bass Pro store and a BP station. That evidence helped construct a psychological profile of the offenders. Two 18-year-olds, Jonah Michael Poole, a former weekend employee at the victim's business, and his girlfriend, Kylie Alyssa Dakes, whose impulsive decisions and attempts at disguise betrayed a disturbing blend of naive desperation and cold planning. The narrative deepens as detectives piece together the timeline. They believe Koza was attacked inside his store as he closed for the day, then bound and forced into his own vehicle. The teens allegedly drove him to a gas station to obtain accelerants, returned to ignite the truck in the shop's parking lot, and fled the scene in another car. Surveillance footage, cell phone records, and mounting physical evidence created an unstoppable web, leading to their arrest. In the courtroom drama that would decide their fate, the atmosphere remained tense. Both Poole and Dakes were denied bail during a June 2nd hearing, signaling the court's view of the severity and calculated nature of their alleged actions. In court documents, investigators laid out the charges: first and second-degree murder, assault, conspiracy to commit murder, and arson. Poole also faced charges for a burglary at a local restaurant just days before the killing, suggesting a pattern of escalating criminal behavior. Case 14. Robert O'Brien, Andrew Kelly, and Donna Marie Brand. It begins with the chill of midnight in late August 1996 on the riverbank of the River Leven in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland. A teenage girl walks toward the so-called Black Bridge, lured by the promise of romance. That girl is Caroline Gloshan. Found that day, August 25, 1996, on her mother's 40th birthday, her life cut short in a manner both brutal and senseless. 14-year-old Caroline Gloshan, infatuated with an older boyfriend, left her home to meet Robert Robbie O'Brien that night, a decision that would end in tragedy. What unfolds is a psychologically complex tale of obsession, betrayal, and cold-blooded violence. Caroline's relationship with O'Brien was deeply controlling. Her friends later recounted how he threatened her, grabbed her by the neck, and slammed her into walls. That was the beginning of the psychological profile of the principal offender, rooted in coercion and a disturbingly primitive drive to dominate. What followed was the most agonizing part of every investigation. A cold case, frozen in time for 27 long years, well beyond most people's patience. Only in 2019 did authorities reopen the investigation, deploying a major investigations team, re-interviewing hundreds of witnesses, and dismantling alibis once thought untouchable. Crucial to cracking the case was a chilling artifact of memory: a 4-year-old boy named Archie, present that night under babysitting care. Although unfit to testify at trial, his statements, later admitted as hearsay, painted an eerie scene of violence unfolding at the river's edge. Years later, his chilling recollection became pivotal psychological and evidentiary testimony. When the trial finally began at the High Court in Glasgow in late 2023, the legal proceedings moved through months of testimonies, forensic analysis, and reconstruction of events. Forensic pathologist Dr. Marjorie Turner described extraordinarily violent blunt force trauma: multiple blows, skull fractures, enough force to render Caroline unconscious, and confirmed that she was alive when she entered the water and drowned. Robert O'Brien was portrayed as the principal aggressor. The judge described the crime as brutal, depraved, and wicked. His psychological profile emerged as deeply threatening, with a capacity for premeditated violence tinged by jealousy and control. Andrew Kelly, by contrast, played a lesser role, throwing rocks in a coordinated assault, and was convicted on an art and part basis. Legal proceedings explored joint responsibility, dissecting whether each acted as co-perpetrators or accessories. Donna Marie Brand, while uninvolved in direct assault, knowingly participated in the plan and failed to intervene, bearing legal responsibility as well, with her culpability mitigated by age and relative role. Sentencing hearings brought closure. O'Brien was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years, Kelly to 18 years, and Brand to 17 years. In court, Lord Braid lamented that Caroline was a lover of life, robbed of her future, and that her mother endured years of agonizing uncertainty. Caroline's mother, Margaret McKeitch, spoke through tears, acknowledging justice had been served, even though no sentence could bring her daughter back. If these stories made you think twice, if they gripped you, shocked you, or left you craving to know what lies beneath the surface, hit that subscribe button now and join the Mindframe True Crimes family. Every week, we dive deeper into the hidden corridors of the human mind, unraveling the truths behind the headlines and the secrets even courtrooms can't fully reveal. And to all my loyal subscribers and returning viewers, thank you for keeping your mind in the frame. You're the reason we can keep shining a light into the world's darkest corners. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, the mind is the most dangerous place of all. This is Mindframe True Crimes. Until next time.